Thanks for joining us here for the Voice of the People podcast on kxnet.com. I'm Nicholas Kwolek, and today we are talking about the race for the state auditor. Joining me now is the current state auditor, Josh Gallion. Mr. Auditor, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
People may know your name, they may have heard about you, but they may have not had the opportunity to talk to you at length or at all in person. So why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
So I've been the state auditor now for 8 years, looking at trying to get reelected to my third term. Prior to being the state auditor, I worked for the North Dakota Public Service Commission as their chief financial officer. Before that, I worked at the Department of Transportation in driver's license and in their finance department. I also worked for the private sector and for an industrial sales company that supported our energy industry here in North Dakota, and working on supporting sales, office management. And I've also served in the United States Air Force. My educational background, I have an associate's degree from Bismarck State College. I have 2 four-year bachelor degrees from Dickinson State University in accounting and business administration. And I have a master's degree in business administration from the University of North Dakota. I'm also married to my beautiful and amazing wife, Becky, and we have 2 daughters, and we live right here in Bismarck.
So why are you running again for office?
Well, in the last 8 years, we've done some really amazing things to modernize the office, but there's still so much more that we can accomplish. These audit reports, as we look at them, they are full of information and data. But right now that they are really just, the information is kind of locked up in a PDF. And to be able to take that information, you have to go report by report. And so the modernization of efforts that we've taken, we want to take it to the next step. We want to make sure that we can try to provide greater transparency by pulling some of that data, creating systems and processes that allow for everyday citizens to be able to go onto our website, pull up information on what revenues, expenditures, those types of topics about their local governments. And so really trying to enhance the ability to analyze data. And it wouldn't be right if I didn't give a little bit of credit to Governor Doug Burgum. Back in 2017, when I first took office, he reached out to us and he was asking about a lot of this information and asked, what did we have? I think the information he was looking at the time was he wanted to know how much debt was on the books for local governments. And we told him, yes, we have it. But most of it is in the reports. And at that time, these were paper reports that we had. And so some of the modernization efforts that we've taken is we've gone from a paper process system to now digital. And all of our reports now for the past, since 2017, we have made those available electronically. They're on our website, and those can be accessed at the click of a button. So we've taken some of those steps. It's been quite a process to modernize. We've developed customer management software to manage the nearly 2,000 local government entities that we oversee. About 1,600 of them require annual reviews. So we help compile simplified financial reports that we go through to make sure that their financials are in order. Any transfers, the revenues, the expenditures, everything ties out and is accurate to the financial statements. The other 400 actually require audits. And those 400, we are about 15% of the market share. So some of the modernization efforts that we've taken is making sure that we have good communication and good relationships with our private partners, because our private auditing firms here in North Dakota, they carry the bulk of the weight when it comes to conducting these much needed audits here in North Dakota. So a lot of that, those steps had to take place first. And now we are looking at developing tools and techniques to try to get that information reported to us that's within those audit reports and make that available in databases through our website.
Just from a practical standpoint, there are so many offices one can run for in government and on the local level and state level. Why did you decide to run in the first place for state auditor?
Well, my goal is always to try to have a positive influence on government. And when I think of trying to accomplish that goal, there's no office like the Office of State Auditor to touch all levels of government here within the state of North Dakota. You know, we audit the nearly 80 state agencies, the campuses, the university system office. We are auditing, as I talked about, those nearly 2,000 local government entities. We are even involved out in the oil patch. We have a federal mineral royalty division that they are tasked, they're funded by the federal government, but they are really tasked with verifying that the royalty payments owed to the federal government are happening as they should. Now, I'm not always concerned about money going to the federal government. The thing that I love most about that program and the work that that team does is because we know the federal side, we also know the state side. And so that team works very closely with the treasurer's office to ensure that the royalty payments coming in to the state are accurate and that they're correct. And so when we find errors or deficiencies in some of that reporting, we do have to report that to the federal government. But all of those royalties that we find and collect, that also means there's likely a state share coming back to the state of North Dakota to help benefit our citizens.
You obviously are there to, like you said, make sure everything is productive and follows the regulations that they're assigned to. I want to though go back a little bit in time and focus on back in 2019, when the amount of freedom you and your office was restricted, more or less. There was some criticism about more audits being done than your predecessor. What were the reasons that you were told, and to what extent has that affected your abilities to carry out your job as auditor?
Yes, we've had some challenges with the legislature. We've also had some successes working with the legislature, and some of the things that we've been able to accomplish, you know, for local governments. We've raised the threshold, reducing the burden. We took 100 clients away from needing full audits and got them over to these small government reviews. You know, as for challenges, we continue to focus on providing transparency to government, educating the citizens, because it's the citizens in North Dakota that hold government accountable. The auditor's office, we are just their eyes and ears. We're the ones that are constantly looking, evaluating, making sure that government is being a good steward of taxpayer resources. And when we find they aren't, it is our obligation in accordance with the laws, the rules, the auditing standards to inform all stakeholders, whether it's the agency, the legislature, and the citizens.
Mhm. So to walk people through the process, because I don't think a lot of people might know how that works. So most of the time, from what I understand, is that when those audits are required, unless they meet a certain dollar amount threshold, was not too long ago, that was lowered. Um, you would your office gets paid to do the audit, but obviously you have to sort of let them know how much it's going to cost. And so walk us through that process as far as, you know, from start to finish, what the, you know, from, you know, letting people know that it's coming up time for an audit and costs and so on.
So that those thresholds that you're talking about, those are really for our local government audit clients. When I first took over as state auditor, that threshold was around $300,000. And when you look at the cost of auditing today, we've all experienced unprecedented inflationary costs. We've seen fuel costs skyrocket, food prices skyrocket, wages have had to go up to make sure that we are providing competitive compensation to retain our talented workforce. And so what that has caused is for us to reevaluate. And that's where we, 2 sessions ago, we looked at upping that threshold to 750,000, which was the same threshold as the requirement for needing a single audit, a federal single audit. So if you spend more than $750,000 in federal funds in a fiscal period, you are required by the federal government to have one of these single audits conducted. Now, last session, we really evaluated those numbers. We realized that moving that threshold up was the right thing to do. We just didn't go quite far enough. And so putting that up to $2 million, and some of the other, it's helped. It's reduced the burden on industry, especially with the private sector. We have challenges with our workforce, just like they do. And so by taking some of those clients off needing audits, moving them over to these small government reviews, it saves them the cost of, some of these audits are 15, 20, 30, sometimes $50,000. On the smaller end, those 15 to $20,000 audits, getting them over to our small government review, that might go down to, five, six, $700. And so those savings are real. They help benefit local communities who, when they're on the lower end of that, revenue is an issue. They don't have a lot of funds in the bank. And so we are constantly looking at ways to reduce the burden on providing this transparency that the citizens expect. They want to know how their government is spending their money. And so we are constantly looking at those types of opportunities. Some of the improvements that we have made since last session, some of the positive that came out of our discussions with legislators, we now do cost proposals. So we actually go out to our clients, we provide them a cost estimate that they have to approve. And so when there's no surprises. We want to make sure that they understand, here's the total liability that we estimate that this audit will cost. If there are unforeseen things, if we provide a cost estimate and there is now another component unit, or they require a single audit, we make sure that the clients are clearly notified, that they are aware of those additional costs, and they actually sign off on change orders. So a lot of the things that we've implemented now are a lot closer to what the private sector does. In the past, we've kind of dealt with our clients on a handshake. And I think in North Dakota, we really like being able to do that kind of business. But in today's day and age, we want to make sure that the auditor's office is not only protected, but our clients are also fully aware of what those estimated costs are going to be. So again, another part of our process that we have modernized and improved over the last 8 years.
I've got a couple follow-ups to those questions, as you might imagine. But first, I want to give you an opportunity. What have you heard or have been told since you've been the auditor as a criticism or perhaps a misunderstanding that you hear a lot and you'd like to clear up for our viewers about what the office does and what it doesn't do, perhaps?
Well, I think a lot of times, some of the criticism is, that we're out there to play getcha or gotcha to try to make people look bad. That's never our goal. Our focus is on transparency. We stick to the facts, the information and documentation that we collect. And so the audit reports that we produce, we do take independence very seriously. We want to make sure that we are in compliance with all laws, all rules, that we not only meet the auditing standards, but we exceed the standards. And so, that's where we are really focused on making sure that we can provide that transparency. And it's not about trying to play getcha or make anybody look bad. We just want to be factual. We want to make sure that we provide that information, and so that the people of this state, again, know how their government is spending their money.
Mm-hmm. So with that, obviously, you want to not only make organizations better, but as you said, transparent. At the same time, tell us what the process is without obviously getting into too much details. Tell us about the process as far as once you get done with an audit. Is there a certain amount of or limitation you try to put on as far as releasing? Because obviously no one wants to hear that they individually or their office, not to say that you say they're doing a bad job, but in other words, when you put out an audit report, people see that and then they see, oh, this is where everybody needs to improve. And so how do you balance out doing your job without making, a certain organization, bringing them negative attention, I guess?
That's always a challenge, trying to find that balance. That's where when we talk about these things, especially when I'm out, discussing this with either legislators or the media, I always refer to these as opportunities for improvement. When we have findings, a lot of times they are taken negatively. Now, from an audit standpoint, in accordance with standards, we have to report deficiencies. So by nature, in audit, if there is a finding in there, it is going to have that negative connotation. Because if everything's going right, for us, no news is good news. And so if we have to put information out there, we make that information available. Unfortunately, yes, a lot of times it is negative, but our goal is to try to bring attention to the deficiency, to make sure that the organization is fully aware on how to make those corrections. When it's serious enough, we need to make sure that the other stakeholders, whether it's legislators or the citizens, aware, because the auditor's office does not have the authority to force those improvements. It has to come from outside. And so it's so important that these other stakeholders and those charged with governance are made aware of this, so that those correct pressures can be placed on making sure that any of these deficiencies that we identify are corrected and improved. I mean, nothing makes us happier to go in and identify a deficiency. And when we do our follow-up audit, we see those corrective actions. When we retest to verify that those steps have been taken and done properly, that finding no longer exists. That makes us extremely happy to know that, again, using our skills, our talents, our workforce, we are making government better, more transparent, and ultimately more accountable to those that we serve.
So if you could get in a little more detail, so in your purview, to what extent do you have the authority to say, let's not publicly, let's back off on a certain agency and not put the results out there? Are you able to do that?
So just to make sure I understand, I mean, we don't issue press releases on every single audit.
Okay.
We don't put that information out there on every single engagement. What we're looking at and kind of how we've developed this over time and how we've improved is when we do need to make something more widespreadly known. So the most recent example that I can kind of point to is our audit of the Department of Health and Human Services. We did do a press release on that audit. And the reason why we felt that was so important is because when we have child abuse cases, and this is being something that we have really pushed on for nearly a decade, and we just have not seen the level of improvement. These are the things that we need to make sure that the public is aware of, that some of those in our communities, the most vulnerable, we're not doing everything we can. And to me, the state of North Dakota, with our vast resources, I believe we can do better. I think we must do better when we're dealing with some of these cases. And now, I don't want this to sound like I'm disparaging those people on the front lines who are really doing God's work out there. Some of the things that they see are horrific, and some of the worst things imaginable. And I've had people tell me stories that they could no longer do the job because they couldn't handle seeing any more dead babies. That to me is just awful to hear, to know that is happening in our communities. And so really, I want to make sure that we are bringing awareness to this, to making sure that, these agencies, Department of Health and Human Services, the social service zones, even the governor's office is aware, and that this needs to be a priority. When you look at the Department of Transportation, we have Vision Zero. If you drive on the roads, a single fatality is unacceptable. Well, to me, I think we could apply the same pressure on child abuse cases to make sure that we are responsive, we are meeting the needs of these most vulnerable, and using the resources and the capabilities of the state of North Dakota to help improve for these unfortunate situations.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I like about this format on the Voice of the People is, we don't normally get to, in the news business, on our side of things, have an at-length conversation about certain topics that you might see little snippets in. So I appreciate it, and I would hope my other guests have as well. One of the things that people may not know, but it's certainly public knowledge, is that your office itself is required to undergo the National State Auditors Association audit every 3 years, correct?
Correct. So there's been a lot of discussion about who audits the auditor. In accordance with government auditing standards, we are required to undergo a peer review. Now, that peer review process is actually administered by the National State Auditors Association. It is a group of state auditors, and within that, our peer review program, what we wind up doing is sharing state resources. These are other government auditors from around the country, and so when we have to undergo our peer review, a team of government auditors is sent, and they look at our audits making sure that our work papers, our documentation, everything is done in accordance with the standards that we're required to follow. And we've been fortunate enough to have some very good outcomes the last several years. We've had the highest rating, which is just it's pass. You don't want to have fail. So that's where internally within the North Dakota State Auditor's Office, we've really focused on making sure that our quality assurance team, the individuals within the auditor's office that verifies that our work papers, our documentation, our conclusions, the audit reports, everything doesn't just meet the standards, but exceeds the standards for our state agency audits, our local government audits. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. But in the end, we want to make sure that the information that we put out there to all of our key stakeholders is accurate, it's objective, and everything is supported within the work papers.
So then, if you could explain, Mr. Auditor, what was or what is your understanding as to why our state legislators, at their behest, wanted to have another audit of your office?
I'm not sure exactly what their individual rationales were. What we look at is we see this performance audit as an opportunity, again, to look at our internal processes. We believe in continuous improvement. Mm-hmm. We are working with that audit team. That audit is undergoing right now. And we are working on getting them all of the information that they ask for. In the end, I'm very confident that my team does amazing work, that they are fantastic. That being said, if there are opportunities that these external auditors see, that they can make recommendations that we can make our office even better for the citizens of North Dakota, I welcome that extra review. I've said I don't think it's necessary. Again, I think my team does fantastic work, but we have it. The legislature passed it. It's happening. And so we are doing everything we can to make sure that we are complying with all of their information requests, and we look forward to hopefully learning potentially ways that we can enhance our procedures.
Do you have any idea as to when that might be completed? Would that be after the start of the legislative session?
I don't have an end date. I know we're in the process of complying with information requests and records requests. So we have several people in the office that are working on that. I don't know when we'll have that final report.
Okay. So as you look forward to not too many weeks left until Election Day, anything since your time in office that you look back and think you could have done a bit differently or better?
Well, I think there's always, again, continuous improvement. There's always things that we can enhance. I look at some of the things that we've had to fix early on with some of our internal processes and procedures and some of the modernization. I look back and think, we should have probably had more dialogue with private firms earlier on, but there were a lot of other processes that we needed to fix before we could really get to that point where we talk about establishing form and content for audits. But yeah, I think continuous improvement is something that we're always looking at doing and looking past of what we've done, we can learn from it. We're always doing that in the auditor's office. One of the things that we always talk about is R&D. Rip off and duplicate is what we look at that as, and we're always evaluating not just ourselves, but other state organizations around the country. What can we look to improve and enhance? Who's doing it the best? How can we take that information, adjust it to have it fit here in North Dakota, so that we can be better at our jobs?
Uh-huh. And explain, if you wouldn't mind, as far as the relationship, as far as how it works. When you talk about working with the staff and the legislature, you have you are obviously the state auditor, but as far as how everyone is sent out to perform an audit, can you give us a little bit of an insight as far as how that process is initiated and then kind of people sent out to do their job?
Well, within the auditor's office, we're broken down into different divisions. We have our agency team comprised of 3 audit managers. So 3 small teams. They are responsible for conducting the audits of state government. We have a local government team, 1 team here in the Bismarck office, Another team in our Fargo office. They conduct the audits for our clients, for local governments. And then we have our federal mineral royalty team, and they are conducting those royalty reviews. The audits are assigned to the teams. We do rotate those audits from time to time. The audits are conducted for state agencies once every 2 to 4 years, depending on complexities. Risk is also something that we evaluate. So if it's a smaller organization, it might be something where we do it every 4 years. And then what we'll wind up looking at is if it's a 4-year audit, we'll conduct that audit, that performance-based audit over the previous 4 years. Larger organizations, like the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Transportation, those are going to be our 2-year audits that we routinely conduct. And then our university system team for our state agency side, they're in our Fargo office. They're part of our state agency division. They're looking at the campuses and then some other commodity groups. They audit the state mill and elevator. So those are done on a 2-year basis. But those audits are assigned to the different audit managers, and then they work within their teams and with our clients to get those scheduled out for the next 12 to 24 months.
I know every agency is a little bit different, every sort of audit's different, but is there such a thing as a common issue you find across all sorts of audits?
Well, so if we look at local governments, we do have some common findings that, it's something that we, by standard, we have to make people aware. But when you're dealing with a lot of these small entities that just don't have the human resources, segregation of duties is a finding that we see often. We're a very rural state. We have small local governments. They might only have a city auditor or business manager and nobody else. And so we have to identify that lack of segregation of duties. If one person has too much control or authority, we have to report it. And, the typical response is they'll address that if resources become available. But as we know, workforce issues here in the state, they continue to be a challenge. Financial statement preparation. Right now, that's another finding that we see with local governments that is very routine. If the auditors, any auditors, whether it's us or a private firm, if they are assisting in the financial statement preparation, we do have to identify that as a finding and issue that in the report to make sure that the readers are aware that the auditors had, they supported the financial statement preparation, even though the management has to take ownership of those. Anytime that we help, that's a required finding. As for state agencies, those vary a little bit more, whether it's procurement issues. Those can be a case by case. And when we look at state agencies, some of these agencies are very large. And one of the things that I'm constantly kind of reminding people of is when we look at an audit, we're only looking at one small sliver of the pie. We might take samples, we might take, some reviews on some of the financials, but when we do tests, we're only testing a few items to give us a level of assurance that the sample that we have is a good representation of the total population. So we don't look at everything. And I think that's a misconception that people have on auditing. We do the best that we can through the risk assessment process to identify where should we focus that testing and sampling at to try to make sure that if there are any deficiencies or if there are any errors, how can we develop those auditing procedures to ensure that we try to capture and see all of that. It doesn't mean that it still could, it gets detected. It can still go undetected in our procedures, but we try to make sure that we use analytics, different sampling, the risk assessment process to try to give us the best opportunity to verify that when we look at something, that information is accurate, and any of the reports or the financial statements are a fair representation of management.
And finally, Mr. Auditor, why should North Dakotans reelect you?
Well, for me, I've been focused on transparency. I've been focused on education, making sure that the auditor's office is working for the citizens of North Dakota. We have put more information into the hands of the people than any auditor before me. The information that people have at their fingertips today is so much better and so much more readily available. And to me, we have plans to go even beyond that. You know, with our data acquisition or data access initiative, we want to make sure that we've got information on local governments that people can look up. You know, what are the revenues? What are the expenditures? What kind of debt? You know, to make sure that, again, we continue to be transparent. We continue to build these tools and these resources and enhance the capabilities of the auditor's office to make sure that we can educate all of our stakeholders, our agencies, our legislators, and most importantly, the citizens of North Dakota.
Okay. Well, State Auditor Josh Gallion, thank you so much for your time. I deeply appreciate it. And thank you for watching the Voice of the People podcast here on kxnet.com. We'll be back soon with more on the questions and answers affecting you. Because remember, it's your voice that matters, the voice of the people.